Stay away, Dad. Cut off by my own daughter, I fire back with an ultimatum. Sell our 4-generation ranch, unless she finally faces me. The text message arrived at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee from the chipped mug Sarah had made in her high school pottery class. 3 words that would change everything. Stay away, Dad. I stared at my phone screen until the letters blurred, reading those words over and over like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Stay away from what? From who? From the daughter I'd raised for 18 years before she left for college and somehow transformed into a stranger. My hands shook as I set down the mug, coffee sloshing onto the kitchen table I'd built when Sarah was 7. She'd helped me sand it smooth, her small fingers tracing the wood grain while chattering about her favorite books. Now that same table felt like evidence of a life that no longer existed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The backstory to this moment stretched back 2 years, though I didn't understand it then. Sarah had graduated from Northwestern with a degree in journalism and immediately moved to Portland with her boyfriend Marcus. Their relationship had always felt rushed to me, intense in that way young love burns hot and fast. But Sarah was 22, and I'd learned to bite my tongue about her choices. The first red flag should have been Thanksgiving. She'd called 3 days before to cancel, claiming Marcus's family had invited them to Aspen for the holiday. It was the first Thanksgiving we'd spent apart since her mother died when Sarah was 12. I'd eaten turkey alone in our farmhouse kitchen, surrounded by empty chairs and the echo of traditions that suddenly felt meaningless. Christmas followed the same pattern. Then Easter. Then her birthday passed without so much as a phone call returned. My attempts to reach her grew more desperate and, I'll admit, more frequent. Daily texts became twice daily. Voicemails stretched longer as I tried to fill the silence with updates about the ranch, the horses, the neighbors she'd grown up knowing. Marcus had been the one to finally call me back in March. His voice carried that particular brand of condescension that comes from someone who thinks they understand your daughter better than you do. Mr. Patterson, Sarah asked me to tell you that she needs some space right now. She's dealing with some things, working through some childhood trauma with her therapist. It would be better if you didn't contact her for a while. Childhood trauma. The words hit like a physical blow. What trauma? I'd given Sarah everything I could after her mother's death. I'd learned to braid her hair by watching YouTube videos. I'd attended every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. I'd taught her to ride horses, to drive stick shift, to change a tire, to stand up for herself. What kind of trauma? I'd asked Marcus, my voice barely steady. That's not really my place to say, sir, but maybe you should think about why she feels the need to cut contact. The line went dead, leaving me alone with questions that multiplied like weeds in spring rain. For 3 months, I'd respected her wishes. I'd stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped sending the care packages I'd been mailing to her apartment. The silence stretched between us like barbed wire, cutting deeper with each passing day. I threw myself into ranch work, mending fences and fixing equipment that didn't need fixing, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from wandering to the empty bedroom upstairs. But Tuesday morning's text message changed everything. Stay away, Dad wasn't a request for space, it was a declaration of war. I walked outside to the front porch, where the morning air still carried the chill of high country spring. The Crazy Horse Ranch stretched out before me in all directions, 4,000 acres of Montana grassland rolling toward the Absaroka Mountains. This land had been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather had homesteaded here in 1891. My grandfather had survived the Depression by raising cattle and breaking horses. My father had modernized the operation, adding the guest ranch component that now brought city folks out to play cowboy for a week. Sarah had grown up on this land. She'd taken her first steps in the main house kitchen. She'd learned to walk in the pasture behind the barn, chasing chickens and gathering eggs. Every summer, she'd help me guide trail rides for guests, her small hands confident on the reins as she led city kids on gentle horses through meadows bright with wildflowers. This ranch was her inheritance, her birthright, her history, written in hoofprints and fence posts and the carved initials we'd left on the old cottonwood by the creek. And now she was telling me to stay away from it? From her? I pulled out my phone and started typing a response, then deleted it. Start it again. Delete it again. What do you say to a daughter who's erased you from her life? How do you bridge a gap when you don't even understand how it got so wide? Instead of texting back, I did something that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. I called my lawyer. Tom, it's Jack Patterson out at Crazy Horse. I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be straight with me. Tom Bradley had been handling legal work for ranchers in Park County for 30 years. He'd drawn up my will, handled the paperwork when I'd bought additional acreage from the Morrison family, and helped me navigate the insurance nightmare after Ellen died. His voice carried the careful neutrality of a man who'd learned not to judge his clients' requests, no matter how strange they might sound. What can I do for you, Jack? If I wanted to sell the ranch, how quickly could it happen? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Tom cleared his throat. Jack, are you feeling all right? This ranch has been in your family for over a century. Why would you want to sell? I didn't say I wanted to sell it, Tom. I asked how quickly I could sell it if I needed to. Well, with the right buyer and cash on the table, probably 90 days, maybe 60 if we found someone who really wanted it and was willing to pay asking price without a lot of negotiation. But Jack, this is a big decision. Maybe you should think about it for a while. Talk to Sarah about it. Sarah, the daughter who just told me to stay away. What if the buyer was Sarah herself? Another long pause. You're Sarah. She'd have to qualify for a loan that size, Jack. Ranch land in this area is going for premium prices right now, especially a spread like yours with the guest operation already established. We're talking about several $1 million. Several $1 million. More money than Sarah had ever seen. Certainly more than a recent journalism graduate could qualify for on her own. But there were ways around that problem, weren't there? Creative financing solutions that would make the impossible suddenly possible. Betitsai. Tom, I want you to draw up a sales contract. List Sarah Patterson as the buyer. Purchase price to be determined by professional appraisal. Include a clause for owner financing at 1% interest over 30 years. 1%? Jack, that's basically giving it away. You could get market rate interest at least. I don't want market rate. I want 1%. Can you do it or not? I can do it, but I don't understand why you would. This ranch is your life's work, Jack. It's your legacy. My legacy. I looked out over the pastures where Sarah had learned to rope calves, where she'd helped me deliver foals on cold spring nights, where she'd sat beside me on the porch swing every summer evening until she left for college, and discovered that her childhood home was apparently something she needed to stay away from. Maybe my legacy needs a new owner, Tom. Draw up the papers. After I hung up, I sat on the porch steps and tried to piece together where everything had gone wrong. Sarah had been happy here, hadn't she? She'd brought friends home from college, showing them around the ranch with obvious pride. She'd talked about maybe coming back someday, about raising her own children in the same house where she'd grown up. But something had shifted during her senior year. Phone calls became shorter, visits home less frequent. She'd started seeing the therapist Marcus mentioned, started talking about processing her past and healing from things I couldn't identify. When I'd asked her directly what was troubling her, she'd just said she was figuring some things out and needed time to think. Time to think had apparently led her to the conclusion that I was someone she needed to stay away from. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and my heart hammered against my ribs as I answered. Dad? Her voice sounded smaller than it had in months, uncertain in a way that reminded me of the little girl who used to wake me up during thunderstorms. Hi, sweetheart, I got your text this morning. I know, I shouldn't have sent it. Marcus said I should just block your number, but I couldn't do that without explaining first. Marcus? Of course he was involved in this conversation somehow. What do you need to explain, Sarah? Because I have to tell you I'm pretty confused about what's happening between us. I've been working with my therapist on some childhood issues, Dad. Things I remember differently than you might. Things that affected me more than I realized at the time. I sat forward on the porch steps, my grip tightening on the phone. What kind of things, Sarah? Help me understand. It's complicated, Dad. Dr. Martinez says that children often don't recognize unhealthy patterns until they're adults and can process them with proper perspective. Dr. Martinez, another name I'd never heard before, another person who apparently knew my daughter better than I did. What patterns are we talking about? Sarah's voice wavered, like she was reading from notes she'd prepared. The isolation, for one thing. Growing up so far from town, from other kids my age, having to work on the ranch instead of having normal teenage experiences. The way you made all the decisions about my life without asking what I wanted. Each accusation felt like a physical blow. The isolation? We'd lived 30 miles from town, but she'd had friends, activities, a normal childhood. The work. She'd helped with chores like every ranch kid, but I'd never forced her to do anything she didn't want to do. The decisions? I'd been a single father trying to raise a daughter in a world that didn't come with an instruction manual. Sarah, you love this ranch. You told me so 100 times. You brought your college friends here and showed them everything with such pride. Mom, that's what Dr. Martinez calls learned helplessness, Dad. Children adapt to their circumstances because they have no choice. They convince themselves they're happy because the alternative is too painful to accept. The words sounded rehearsed, clinical, like she was reciting definitions from a psychology textbook rather than describing her own memories. This wasn't my daughter talking. This was someone else's interpretation of her childhood, filtered through the lens of a stranger who'd never seen her face light up when a foal was born, or watched her teach nervous city kids how to brush a horse. And Marcus agrees with this assessment? Marcus has helped me see things more clearly, yes. He grew up in a normal family, Dad. He knows what healthy relationships look like. A normal family. The phrase stung worse than the rest of it combined. Marcus, who'd grown up in suburban Chicago with 2 parents and a trust fund, was apparently the expert on what constituted normal family life. Not the man who'd learned to French braid hair at midnight when Sarah couldn't sleep, who'd attended every school event even when it meant leaving ranch work undone, who'd held her while she cried after her first heartbreak and taught her that she deserved better than boys who didn't treat her with respect. So the solution is for me to stay away from you completely? For now, yes. Dr. Martinez says I need to establish healthy boundaries. I need to learn who I am separate from the person you shaped me to become. The person I shaped her to become. I'd shaped her to become strong, independent, capable of taking care of herself in any situation. I'd shaped her to become someone who could handle adversity without falling apart, who could work hard and find satisfaction in honest labor, who could see beauty in wide open spaces and find peace in solitude when the world got too loud. Apparently, those had been mistakes. How long is for now, Sarah? I don't know, Dad. Maybe a year, maybe longer. Dr. Martinez says healing trauma isn't something you can rush. Trauma. There was that word again, the one that kept getting thrown around without any specific definition. What trauma? The trauma of growing up on a beautiful ranch with a father who loved her more than his own life. The trauma of inheriting a legacy that most people could only dream of. The trauma of having someone who would have moved mountains to make her happy. I love you, Sarah. I've always loved you. If I made mistakes raising you, I'm sorry. But I did the best I could with what I knew. I know you think you love me, Dad. But Dr. Martinez says that sometimes what parents call love is actually control disguised as affection. The phone felt heavy in my hand, like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My daughter was dissecting 22 years of our relationship with clinical precision, turning every memory into evidence of my failures as a parent. Every sacrifice I'd made, every late night I'd stayed up when she was sick, every dream I'd deferred so she could have better opportunities, all of it reframed as psychological manipulation. Sarah, do you remember when you were 16 and wanted to spend the summer in Europe with that exchange program? Of course I remember. Do you remember me telling you that you couldn't go because it was too expensive and I needed help with the ranch? Yes. Her voice was wary now, like she sensed a trap. Do you remember me changing my mind 3 days later and telling you we'd find a way to make it work? Silence on the other end of the line. I sold 12 head of cattle to pay for that trip, Sarah. Cattle I'd been planning to breed for next year's herd. I sold them because I saw how much you wanted to go, and I couldn't stand the thought of being the reason you missed out on something important. That's not how I remember it. Then maybe your memory needs some work too. Maybe Dr. Martinez should help you remember the whole story, not just the parts that fit her narrative. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I was tired of being painted as the villain in my own daughter's life story. I was tired of having my love questioned by people who didn't know the first thing about what we'd been through together. I have to go, Dad. Marcus is taking me to lunch. Sarah, wait. Before you hang up, I need to tell you something. I've made a decision about the ranch. What kind of decision? I'm putting it up for sale. Since you need to stay away from it and it's been our family home for 4 generations, it seems like the right time to let someone else take care of it. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You're selling the ranch? That's right. Tom Bradley's drawing up the paperwork today. Should be on the market within the week. But Dad, that's your whole life. That's our family history. Our family history. Interesting how it became our history the moment I threatened to sell it. It was our family history, sweetheart. But you've made it pretty clear that you want nothing to do with our family anymore. So I figure it's time to move on. I never said I wanted nothing to do with the family. I just said I needed space to process some things. Space from me means space from everything I represent, doesn't it? This ranch, this life, this history we built together. If it's all so traumatic for you, then maybe it's better in someone else's hands. Dad, please don't do anything drastic. Maybe we could talk about this when I'm ready. When will that be, Sarah? Because I'm 62 years old, and I don't have forever to wait for you to decide whether I'm worth having in your life or not. Another long pause. I could hear voices in the background, probably Marcus offering his expert opinion on this latest development. I need to think about this, she finally said. You do that, sweetheart. Think about it real hard, because once that ranch is gone, it's gone forever, just like everything else we used to share. I ended the call and sat staring at my phone, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life or the smartest decision I'd had in months. The morning sun was climbing higher over the mountains, painting the pastures gold in that particular way that only happened in Montana. In a few hours, the guests would start arriving for their afternoon trail ride, city folks eager to experience authentic ranch life for the price of admission. They had no idea they might be some of the last people to ride these trails under Patterson ownership. My phone rang again 20 minutes later. This time it was Tom Bradley. Jack, I've been thinking about our conversation. Are you sure about this? Because once we put that ranch on the market, word's going to spread fast. Properties like yours don't come up for sale very often in this area. I'm sure, Tom, but I want to make one change to those papers you're drawing up. What kind of change? I looked out over the land my great-grandfather had claimed with nothing but determination and a willingness to work harder than the next man. 4 generations of Patterson blood, sweat, and dreams were written into every acre, every building, every fence post that stretched toward the horizon. I want Sarah listed as having right of first refusal. If anyone makes an offer, she gets 30 days to match it. That's unusual, Jack, but I can write it that way. What's the thinking behind it? The thinking was simple, though I didn't say it out loud. If my daughter wanted to stay away from the ranch so badly, then she'd have to watch someone else buy it. She'd have to live with the knowledge that she could have owned it herself, but chose distance instead. She'd have to explain to her future children why their family heritage belonged to strangers because their mother needed space to process her trauma. Just seems fair, Tom. Give her the option to put her money where her mouth is. And if she can't qualify for financing on her own, then I guess she'll have to figure out what's really important to her. I hung up and walked to the barn where my horses were waiting for their morning hay. Thunder, my old quarter horse gelding, nickered when he saw me coming. He'd been Sarah's favorite when she was younger, gentle enough for a child, but smart enough to take care of her when she got too confident in the saddle. She'd spent countless hours grooming him, talking to him about school problems and friend drama, and all the small crises that seemed monumental when you were 14. Now, Thunder was 23 years old, getting gray around the muzzle but still eager to work. What would happen to him when the ranch sold? Would new owners understand that he needed extra time to warm up on cold mornings? Would they know that he was afraid of plastic bags fluttering in the wind, but would walk calmly past a grizzly bear if you asked him to? The thought of strangers owning my horses, changing the routines we'd perfected over decades, made my chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to panic. But if Sarah wanted distance from this life, then maybe it was time for me to want distance from it too. I spent the rest of the morning doing chores that had become as automatic as breathing over the past 40 years. feed the horses, check water troughs, inspect fences for damage from the spring storms. Each task felt different now, weighted with the knowledge that I might be doing them for the last time as the owner, rather than just another hired hand. The guest ranch operated from May through September, bringing in enough revenue to keep the cattle operation profitable during lean years. We hosted trail rides, overnight camping trips, and week-long packages that promised authentic Western experiences to people whose closest encounter with livestock usually involved a grocery store meat counter. It was honest work, and the guests generally left happy, but it had never been my passion the way the cattle operation was. Sarah had always preferred the guest side of things. She liked meeting new people, sharing stories about ranch life, teaching nervous riders how to sit in the saddle without falling off. She had a natural gift for making city folks feel comfortable in an environment that could seem overwhelming to anyone who hadn't grown up around large animals in wide open spaces. During her college summers, she'd worked as a trail guide and riding instructor, earning money for textbooks and spending time on the land she claimed to love. The guests adored her, especially the teenage girls who saw her as the embodiment of everything romantic about Western life. She'd grown up confident in the saddle, comfortable with hard work, proud of her heritage. At what point had that pride transformed into trauma? When had the confidence become evidence of control? When had the heritage become something she needed to stay away from? My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The area code was Portland. "This is Marcus. Sarah is very upset about your decision to sell the ranch. She asked me to reach out and see if we could find some middle ground here." I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. Marcus, who thought he understood healthy family relationships. Marcus, who'd apparently convinced my daughter that her entire childhood had been one long exercise in psychological manipulation. Marcus was now offering to negotiate on Sarah's behalf. "Tell Sarah she knows my number if she wants to talk to me directly." His response came back immediately. "She's not ready for direct communication yet. Her therapist says it would be counterproductive to her healing process, but she doesn't want to lose the family ranch either. Not ready for direct communication with her own father, but ready to have her boyfriend negotiate the sale of a multi-million-dollar property she'd just finished telling me she needed to stay away from. Then she has a decision to make. Either she wants the ranch or she doesn't. Either I'm family or I'm not. She can't have it both ways." It's not that simple, Mr. Patterson. Trauma recovery is a complex process that requires patience and understanding. Trauma recovery. The phrase was becoming like a magic spell they could invoke to justify any behavior, explain any inconsistency, excuse any cruelty. Sarah could cut her father out of her life in the name of trauma recovery. She could refuse to speak to him directly, but still expect him to accommodate her wishes. She could reject everything he'd given her while simultaneously demanding to keep the most valuable part of it. "Tell my daughter that if she wants to own this ranch, she has 30 days from the time it goes on the market to make an offer. If she's not ready for direct communication by then, I guess she's not ready for ranch ownership either." I powered off my phone before Marcus could respond and walked back outside. The afternoon trail ride group was gathering near the main corral, 12 people from various backgrounds who'd paid good money to experience authentic ranch life. They looked excited and nervous in their new boots and borrowed hats, cameras ready to document their adventure in cowboy country. Jenny Morrison, my lead trail guide, was going through the safety briefing and horse assignments. She'd worked for me for 8 summers, starting when she was 16 and Sarah's age. Now she was 24, married to a local rancher, and pregnant with her first child. She knew these horses and trails as well as anyone, but she'd never be able to buy this place if it went up for public sale. Afternoon, Mr. Patterson," she called out when she saw me approaching. "We've got a good group today. Couple from New York celebrating their anniversary, family from California with teenagers who think they know everything about horses because they've seen Western movies." I nodded and watched her work with the guests, explaining how to hold the reins, how to sit in the saddle, how to communicate with their horses through gentle pressure rather than harsh commands. She had Sarah's natural teaching ability, that gift for making complicated things seem simple and dangerous things seem manageable. "Jenny, can I ask you something?" "Sure, Mr. Patterson. If you had the chance to own a place like this, would you take it?" She looked surprised by the question. "Own the crazy horse? I mean, that would be incredible. but it's not exactly in my price range. Why do you ask? Just wondering what the next generation thinks about ranch life, whether it's something worth preserving or something people need to get away from. Are you kidding? This place is magic, Mr. Patterson. Every kid who grows up in this valley dreams about owning land like this someday. Your Sarah is the luckiest girl in Montana, getting to inherit all this. Inherit. Past tense. As if it was already decided, already done. As if Sarah's inheritance was as certain as sunrise, regardless of whether she wanted anything to do with the man who'd built it for her. What if Sarah doesn't want to inherit it? Jenny's expression shifted from surprise to genuine confusion. Doesn't want it? Mr. Patterson, I've heard Sarah talk about this place. She loves it here. Why wouldn't she want it? Why wouldn't she want it? That was the question I'd been asking myself for months. Why would someone reject a gift that represented 4 generations of family history? Why would someone choose distance from a place that had shaped them into the person they'd become? According to Dr. Martinez and Marcus, the answer was trauma. According to them, Sarah's love for this place had been manufactured. Her happiness here had been an illusion. Her pride in our family heritage had been nothing more than learned helplessness, disguised as affection. But standing there watching Jenny work with the guests, seeing their faces light up as they experienced something most people never get to try, I wondered if maybe the trauma wasn't in Sarah's past. Maybe it was in her present. Maybe it was in letting strangers rewrite her memories, in choosing the opinions of people who'd never known her as a child over the evidence of her own lived experience. Jenny, I need to tell you something, and I need you to keep it between us for now. Of course, Mr. Patterson. I'm thinking about selling the ranch. If that happens, this might be one of the last seasons for the guest operation. Her face went pale under her hat brim. Selling? But why? This place has been in your family forever. Sometimes forever isn't as long as we think it's going to be. The trail ride departed 30 minutes later, 12 guests following Jenny single file toward the mountain trails where they'd spend the next 3 hours pretending to be cowboys. I watched them until they disappeared around the bend near Willow Creek, their voices and laughter fading into the vast silence of the high country. Then I walked back to the house and called Tom Bradley again. Tom, it's Jack. I want to accelerate the timeline on that ranch sale. How accelerated are we talking? I want it listed by the end of the week. Full marketing package, professional photos, the works. Price it to sell quickly. Jack, are you sure about this? Moving this fast doesn't give you much room to change your mind. Change my mind. As if there was anything left to change it about. As if Sarah might suddenly realize that staying away from her father meant staying away from everything he'd built for her. As if Dr. Martinez might decide that maybe some childhood experiences were actually positive, even if they didn't fit the narrative of trauma and recovery. I'm sure, Tom. And Tom, when you write up the listing, make sure it mentions that this ranch has been family-owned for 4 generations. Make sure potential buyers know they're not just buying land and buildings, they're buying a legacy. A legacy that was about to belong to strangers because the person who should have inherited it needed space to process her trauma instead. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and looked around at the life I was preparing to dismantle. Every wall held photographs of Sarah growing up on this land. Her first horse show ribbon was still tacked to the bulletin board near the phone. Her high school graduation photo sat on the counter next to the coffee maker, her smile bright with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she belonged in the world. That girl in the photograph had loved this ranch. She'd planned to come back here someday, maybe raise her own children in the same bedroom where she'd grown up. She'd talked about modernizing the guest operation, maybe adding a spa component or expanding the overnight camping program. But that girl was apparently a figment of my imagination, according to the experts. That girl had been shaped by trauma and control, her dreams manufactured by a father who didn't understand healthy relationships. The real Sarah, the healed Sarah, needed to stay away from all of it. Fine. If staying away was what she needed, then I'd make sure she had all the distance she could handle. My phone rang just as the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that no photograph could ever capture. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. Let her talk to Marcus about it. Let Dr. Martinez help her process her feelings about her father's decision. But she was still my daughter, even if she didn't want to be. Hello, Sarah. Dad, Marcus told me about your messages. You can't really be serious about this. About which part? Selling the ranch or expecting you to talk to me directly if you want to influence my decisions? About all of it. The ranch has been in our family for over a century. You can't just throw that away because you're angry with me. Our family. There it was again. That word she only seemed to remember when something she wanted was at stake. I'm not angry with you, sweetheart. I'm just accepting what you've told me. You need to stay away from me, which means staying away from everything I represent. This ranch is the biggest thing I represent, so I'm making it easier for you. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Then tell me what you did mean. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to reject your old man but keep his land. You want to process your childhood trauma but hold on to your inheritance. You want distance from your father but control over his decisions. Silence on the other end. I could picture her in whatever apartment she shared with Marcus in Portland, maybe sitting on furniture I'd helped her buy, surrounded by the life she'd chosen instead of the one I'd given her. It's more complicated than that, Dad. No, Sarah, it's exactly that simple. Either I matter to you or I don't. Either this ranch represents something valuable or it represents trauma you need to stay away from. You don't get to decide which one it is depending on what's convenient for you at the moment. Dad, please, can we just slow down for a minute? I know this is hard, but selling the ranch isn't going to solve anything. It's going to solve the problem of you needing to stay away from something that belongs to me. Once it belongs to someone else, you won't have to worry about the emotional complications anymore. I heard her take a shaky breath, and for a moment she sounded like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, seeking comfort from the same man she now needed distance from. What if I wanted to buy it myself? The question hung between us like smoke from a campfire, visible but impossible to grasp. I set down my coffee mug and walked to the window where I could see the barn lights glowing in the gathering darkness. Do you want to buy it, Sarah? I think so, maybe, I don't know yet. That's not an answer, sweetheart. Either you want it or you don't. Either it's worth fighting for or it's not. It's complicated, Dad. Dr. Martinez says I need to separate my emotional attachment to the place from my relationship with you. She thinks I might be confusing love for the land with unresolved feelings about my childhood. Dr. Martinez again. The woman who'd never set foot on this ranch, never seen Sarah's face light up when she successfully broke a young horse, never watched her teach nervous city kids that animals could be trusted if you treated them with respect. And what do you think, Sarah? Not Dr. Martinez, not Marcus. What do you think when you close your eyes and remember this place? Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. I think about summer mornings when you'd wake me up before dawn to help with the cattle drive. I hated getting up that early, but once we were out there with the horses in the mountains and all that space, I felt like I could breathe deeper than anywhere else in the world. My throat tightened. Those cattle drives had been some of our best times together, just the two of us working in comfortable silence while the sun painted the peaks gold and the horses picked their way carefully through the sagebrush. What else do you remember? I remember the guest families who came back year after year because they said this was the only place their kids ever felt truly free. I remember Mrs. Chen from San Francisco who cried when she had to leave because her husband had just died, and this was the first place she'd felt peaceful since the funeral. Those are good memories, Sarah. They are. But Dr. Martinez says that doesn't mean the environment was healthy for me as a child. She says children can have positive feelings about situations that were actually harmful to their development. I closed my eyes and counted to 10, reminding myself that getting angry at a therapist I'd never met wouldn't help my relationship with my daughter. Sarah, do you trust your own memories and feelings, or do you trust what other people tell you those memories and feelings should mean? I don't know anymore, Dad. That's the problem. I can't tell what's real and what's just what I convinced myself was real because I didn't have other options. The pain in her voice was genuine, and I felt my anger soften into something that might have been understanding. Maybe she really was confused. Maybe having other people analyze her childhood had made her doubt her own experience. Maybe the confidence and happiness I'd seen in her growing up had been real, but now she couldn't trust it because experts had told her it might have been manufactured. Sweetheart, let me ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer. Okay. If you owned this ranch tomorrow, free and clear, what would you do with it? She was quiet for almost a minute. I could hear voices in the background, probably Marcus offering his opinion, but she didn't respond to whatever he was saying. I think I'd keep the guest operation but expand it. Maybe add some programs for kids who are struggling in school, let them come out here and learn about responsibility through taking care of animals. I think there's something about this kind of life that teaches you things you can't learn in a classroom. My heart swelled with something that felt dangerously close to hope. This was my daughter talking, not Dr. Martinez or Marcus or anyone else. This was the girl who'd grown up understanding that land and animals and hard work could heal things that conventional solutions couldn't touch. That sounds like a wonderful plan, Sarah. But I don't know if I trust my own judgment right now. What if I'm just romanticizing something that was actually harmful? What if I buy the ranch and then realize I made a huge mistake? Then you sell it and move on. But at least you'll have made the decision based on what you wanted, not what other people told you to want. Itify. It's not that simple, Dad. The kind of money we're talking about, I'd need financing, co-signers, a business plan that banks would take seriously. I'm 22 years old with a journalism degree and no credit history to speak of. She was right, of course. Ranch land in our area had become prohibitively expensive, especially a spread like ours with established guest operations and prime grazing land. Even with owner financing at below market rates, she'd need substantial income to qualify for a loan that size. What if money wasn't an issue? What do you mean? I walked back to my chair and picked up the legal documents Tom had sent over, the ones that would transfer ownership of 4 generations of Patterson history to whoever had the biggest checkbook. I mean, what if I structured the sale so that you could actually afford to buy it? Dad, I can't let you just give me a multi-million-dollar ranch. Even if I wanted it, even if I knew for sure it was the right decision, that wouldn't be fair to you. Fair to me. After everything she'd put me through, after months of silence and accusations of trauma and demands that I stay away from my own daughter, she was worried about what was fair to me. 3. Sarah, this ranch has been in our family since 1891. Every generation has passed it down to the next, not because it was profitable or convenient, but because it represented something worth preserving. Your great-great-grandfather didn't homestead this land so that strangers could own it a century later. But if I'm not ready to take care of it properly, if I'm still figuring out who I am and what I want, then maybe it's better in someone else's hands until I get my life together. Or maybe taking care of it is how you figure out who you are. The words surprised me as much as they probably surprised her. I hadn't planned to say them, but once they were out there, I realized they were true. This ranch had shaped 4 generations of Patterson men and women, not because we'd inherited perfect lives, but because the land had demanded we become the kind of people who could handle the responsibility. You think owning the ranch would help me heal? I think owning the ranch would force you to stop analyzing your childhood and start building your future. I think it would give you something bigger than your own problems to focus on. And I think it would reconnect you with the part of yourself that knew exactly who you were before other people started telling you who you should be. Marcus's voice became audible in the background, urgent and insistent. Sarah covered the phone, but I could still hear pieces of their conversation. Something about not making emotional decisions, about needing more time to process, about the importance of maintaining healthy boundaries. When Sarah came back on the line, her voice had changed. The uncertainty was gone, replaced by something that sounded like the girl I'd raised. Dad, if I decided I wanted to try to buy the ranch, how would that work? Tom Bradley has already drawn up papers giving you right of first refusal. If anyone makes an offer, you get 30 days to match it. But Sarah, if you're going to do this, you need to understand what you're taking on. What do you mean? I mean, this isn't just about owning pretty land and playing cowgirl for Instagram photos. This is about getting up at 5 in the morning when it's 20 below zero because the cattle need hay. This is about working 18-hour days during calving season and not taking a real vacation for years at a time because the animals depend on you. This is about making decisions that affect not just your own livelihood, but the families of everyone who works for you. I know that, Dad. I grew up here, remember? I remember a teenager who helped out when it was convenient and went to college when it got hard. I'm talking about adult responsibility now, Sarah. I'm talking about the kind of commitment that doesn't leave room for staying away when things get complicated. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of everything we weren't saying. Finally, Sarah spoke. What would the terms be if I wanted to make an offer? I looked at the papers Tom had prepared, the ones that would give her the ranch at a price she could actually afford if she was serious about wanting it. Purchase price based on professional appraisal, which will probably come in around $3.2 million. Owner financing at 1% interest over 30 years, down payment of 10%, which you could work off by managing the guest operation for the first 2 seasons. 1% interest? Dad, that's basically giving it away. It's keeping it in the family, which is worth more to me than making a profit. More background conversation with Marcus, this time heated enough that I could catch fragments. Something about manipulation, about guilt tactics, about the importance of making independent decisions. Then, Sarah's voice, sharper than I'd heard it in months. Marcus, this is my family's ranch and my decision. Please let me handle this. When she came back to the phone, she sounded different, stronger, more like the confident young woman who'd left for college 4 years ago. Dad, I want to think about this seriously. Not just the financial part, but whether I'm ready for the responsibility you're talking about. Can you give me some time? How much time? 2 weeks. I want to drive out there and spend some time on the property. Remember what it feels like to be there without the pressure of a visit or the complications of our relationship. I want to see if the place still feels like home, or if that was just childhood nostalgia. 2 weeks. 14 days for her to decide whether 4 generations of family history was worth preserving, or whether her need for distance was more important than her heritage. What about your need to stay away from me? I'll stay in the guest cabin by the creek. You can go about your normal routine, and I'll go about mine. We don't have to interact more than necessary for practical purposes. The guest cabin. She wanted to evaluate the ranch that had been her home for 18 years by staying in the cabin we rented to strangers. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. And Marcus? Marcus can stay in Portland. This is something I need to figure out on my own. That was the first thing she'd said in months that gave me genuine hope. Not because she was excluding Marcus, but because she was finally acknowledging that some decisions couldn't be made by committee. All right, Sarah, 2 weeks. But I want you to understand something before you come out here. What's that? Eat and... If you decide you want the ranch, you're not just buying property. You're committing to a way of life that doesn't leave room for staying away when things get difficult. You're taking responsibility for something bigger than yourself. And you're accepting that some relationships are worth working through instead of walking away from. I understand, Dad. I hope you do, sweetheart. Because this isn't a decision you get to unmake 6 months from now when Dr. Martinez decides you're having unhealthy feelings about rural life. For the first time in our conversation, Sarah laughed. It was a small sound, barely more than a breath, but it reminded me of the girl who used to giggle when I told terrible jokes during long trail rides. I'll see you in a few days, Dad. I'll leave the key to the guest cabin under the flower pot by the door. Same place we've always left it. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen as the last light faded from the sky, listening to the familiar sounds of evening on the ranch. Horses moving quietly in their paddocks, the distant lowing of cattle settling down for the night, the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods by the creek. In 2 weeks, I'd know whether my daughter was ready to claim her inheritance, or whether she'd choose the safe distance of a life that didn't require her to remember who she'd been before other people started telling her who she should become. Either way, the ranch would have an owner who wanted it. The question was whether that owner would be family or a stranger with the right amount of cash and no understanding of what this land had meant to 4 generations of people who'd chosen to make their lives in one of the most beautiful and demanding places on earth. I pulled out my phone and sent Tom Bradley a text. Hold off on the listing for 2 more weeks. Family business to sort out first? His response came back immediately. Understood. Hope it works out the way you want it to, Jack. The way I wanted it to work out was simple. I wanted my daughter back. Not the confused young woman who needed to stay away from her father, not the patient working through childhood trauma with a therapist who'd never met her as a child. I wanted Sarah back, the girl who'd known exactly who she was and where she belonged before the world got complicated. In 2 weeks, I'd find out if that girl still existed somewhere, underneath all the analysis and advice and expert opinions about what her memories were supposed to mean. The ranch would wait. It had been waiting for over a century, and it could wait a little longer. The question was whether Sarah was ready to stop running from her past and start building her future. I walked outside to do evening chores, checking water troughs and making sure the horses were settled for the night. The mountains loomed dark against a sky full of stars, the same view Sarah had grown up with, the same landscape that had shaped her understanding of beauty and space and the kind of peace that only comes from being exactly where you belong. In 2 weeks, we'd both know if she remembered what that felt like, or if she'd decided that belonging somewhere wasn't worth the complications that came with it. Either way, I'd have my answer. And either way, the ranch would have an owner who chose it deliberately, not someone who inherited it by default or kept it out of obligation. That much at least was progress. Sarah's rental car pulled into my driveway on a Thursday afternoon while I was replacing fence posts along the north pasture. I saw the dust cloud first, then the unfamiliar sedan picking its way carefully over the cattle guard. My hands kept working on the wire stretchers, but my eyes tracked her progress toward the main house. She parked next to the porch and sat in the car for almost 5 minutes before getting out. From my distance, I could see her looking around at the property like she was seeing it for the first time, taking inventory of what had changed and what had stayed the same. When she finally emerged, she moved with the uncertain steps of someone visiting a place that used to be home. I gave her space to settle in, waiting until evening to walk past the guest cabin. Light glowed golden in the windows, and I could see her silhouette moving around inside. She'd always been restless when she was thinking hard about something. Even as a child, she'd pace when she was working through a problem or trying to make a difficult decision. The next morning, I found boot prints in the soft earth around the barn. She'd been out early, probably checking on Thunder and the other horses she'd grown up with. The old quarter horse's stall showed signs of extra attention, fresh water, and an apple core in his feed bucket. Some habits died hard, apparently. We didn't speak for the first 3 days. I'd catch glimpses of her riding the fence lines on Thunder, or sitting by the creek where she used to go when she needed to think. She was evaluating the property with the careful attention of someone considering a major purchase, but also with the familiarity of someone who knew every trail and pasture by heart. On Saturday morning, I was loading hay bales when she appeared at the barn entrance. She wore jeans and boots that had seen recent use, her hair pulled back in the practical ponytail I remembered from her teenage years. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, Sarah. How's the cabin treating you?" "It's fine. Quiet." She moved closer, running her hand along Thunder's neck as he hung his head over the stall door. "He's gotten gray." 23 years old now? Still rides like he's half that age when he wants to." She nodded, her attention focused on the horse rather than me. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the responsibility. And? I want to understand it better, not just remember what it was like being a kid here, but see what it would actually mean to run this place as an adult." I set down the hay bale I was carrying. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. The guest operation, the cattle business, the seasonal staff, the maintenance schedules, all of it." For the next week, Sarah threw herself into learning the ranch with the intensity she'd once brought to college papers and journalism projects. She shadowed me during morning chores, asked detailed questions about profit margins and seasonal challenges, spent hours reviewing the books and maintenance records. She worked alongside Jenny on guest trail rides, helping nervous riders and sharing the stories about local history that had always made her a natural guide. Most importantly, she did it all without Marcus calling every few hours, without lengthy therapy sessions to process each new piece of information. She was making this decision with her own mind, using her own judgment. On her final evening, I found her sitting on the porch swing where we'd shared countless summer sunsets when she was growing up. The mountains were painted purple and gold in the fading light, and the familiar sounds of evening were settling over the ranch. "Mind if I join you?" She scooted over to make room, and for the first time in months, we sat together in comfortable silence. Finally, she spoke. "I want to buy it, Dad, not because it's a good investment or because I'm supposed to want it, but because this place is part of who I am. I forgot that for a while, but I remember now. Relief flooded through me so suddenly I had to grip the porch railing to steady myself. You sure about this, sweetheart? It's going to be hard work, I'm sure. And Dad? I'm sorry about everything that happened. The things I said, the way I shut you out. I was confused about a lot of things, but I was wrong about you, about us, about this place. I reached over and took her hand, feeling the calluses she'd earned during her week of ranch work. We'll figure out the paperwork with Tom, get you set up as the new owner. Actually, I was thinking about something different. She turned to face me, her eyes bright with the kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. What if we ran it together? You've got 40 years of experience I can learn from, and I've got energy and new ideas. Partnership instead of inheritance. Partnership. The word hung between us like a bridge across everything that had gone wrong, offering a path forward that neither of us had considered. That might work, I said, squeezing her hand. That might work just fine. The stars were coming out over the Crazy Horse Ranch, same as they had for over a century. But tonight, they were shining on a future that looked entirely different than it had 2 weeks ago. Sarah was home, not as the confused young woman who needed to stay away, but as the partner who was ready to help carry on 4 generations of family legacy. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't property or money. Sometimes it's the chance to remember who you really are. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.